Welcome to Film Food, where the culture is clear as the kicks. I'm Shifu Payne, and today we bring an end to this year's Monster Month. Is it on a high note? But first, shenanigans. Yes, I know, I'm doing it too. We gotta get the bread somehow. So I've been looking through the analytics of this here channel, and I found that only 6% of you guys are subscribed. Yeah, that's weak. So I am asking you guys to subscribe. It doesn't take much, it's free. You just press that little button and you'll be part of our here community. Right, thank you so much for your time. Back to the video.
Released in 2014 and directed by Gary Shaw, Dracula Untold was supposed to be another attempt to kick off Universal's reboot of their classic monsters, much like the Wolfman before it in 2009. By this time, it was post-Avengers, and it was clearly time for a cinematic universe war. It did okay enough at the box office, but the critical reception came back with a resounding
So this film became less Iron Man and more Iron Man 2. But while the box office and critical reception was not quite enough to start a franchise, is there still something of merit in this film? Well, let's take a look and find out, starting with the plot.
The 15th century brings the Prince of Wallachia, Vlad Dracula, played by Luke Evans, ruling over his people justly and wisely, with his wife and son by his side. Then, everything changed when the Ottomans attacked. Demanding a troop of children as new soldiers, including Vlad's son, Vlad makes a deal with the dark and ancient power to protect his kingdom. With only 3 days to do something, Vlad must protect his people and his son, while also making sure to not succumb to the darkness within.
Okay, so this film takes inspiration from the idea that Dracula was, in fact, Vlad Tepes, and transformed into a vampire.
They don't actually make this connection in the books. Certainly Bram Stoker was inspired by Tepes to create Dracula, but he did not say they were the same person. Near as I can tell, this idea came from 1992's Bram Stoker's Dracula, and there is where we find the core facet of this film. Basically, if you see the first 10 minutes of this film, you get the idea for this film, which is the same plot stretched out for an hour and a half. Vlad Tepes fights some dude, wife dies falling off a tower, Vlad becomes a vampire, lives a long ass time until finding a reincarnation of his wife.
In general, the story is about the same, but what about in the details?
In the 1992 film, Vlad's wife dies thinking he's been killed. Vlad is enraged by the church's renouncing of her soul for killing herself.
Understandable.
And so renounces God in his grief and in his anger, becoming an enemy of God who would not protect the woman he loves.
Interesting, but what about in the 2014 film?
Here, he initially becomes a vampire selflessly to protect his people and son, and in this deal with an elder vampire who is apparently Caligula. He can become human again after 3 days if he does not drink blood. Simple, clean, cool. But then when his wife is dying and his son is taken, he drinks her blood at her request to have the power to save their son. It seems there's a crucial difference between the two, which creates a dichotomy that would have played into potential sequels and this cinematic universe. With the 1992 film, we're given just enough for him to be sympathetic. He's still a horrific monster, but also he's a grief-stricken, pained person who we can sympathize with. Whereas the 2014 version is an action hero making fists out of clouds of bats and sweeping through armies, entering into the darkness selflessly.
You see, it's difficult to picture that kind of person as the Dracula that we all know.
One is the Prince of Darkness, the other is, I don't know, the reluctant hero of darkness.
Will my opinion change in any way as we go through this film's fight scenes? Let's take a look and find out.
We're going to begin here, in the big climax of the film. After a massive attack to the Wallachian stronghold, Vlad has converted mortally wounded people into his army as he takes on the Ottoman camp and goes to save his son, wearing the armor which was a symbol for the murderer he once was, symbolizing how he must become that person again in a new way to save his son, but in a way still holding back. He doesn't enter on a cloud of bats or become some unholy monster. I mean, come on, this is Dracula! Why does he need an army to take on a camp? My interpretation is that he in some way does not want to wholeheartedly give in to the darkness. He wants to do this as the man he was, as some last way to try to be a good man, the one person he has left. Vlad enters the tent of this film's Mehmed II, which is being caked in silver coins, a vampire's weakness. In the most extreme round of The Floor is Lava, the sword fight begins.
Extreme close-up!
This sort of shooting is sort of a shame because apparently they put a lot of work into this scene. 4 months of work went into this one fight scene, continually training, tweaking it, changing it to get the best product possible, wanting it to be more realistic and grittier.
Did they succeed? I don't know, I can't see any of it.
If it's not the close-ups and mid-frames, it's a shaky camera, and if it's not that, there's frames and shit in the way. Or there are quick cuts.
Wow, over 4 months of work put into one fight scene. Well, okay, what can we see? What can we comment on?
Well, we have here, where the two get caught in a trap. When we cut to another shot, we see Vlad with a wider stance, indicating that he has to put more effort behind staving off Mehmed.
As vampires do!
Mehmed gives Vlad a kick in the knee.
You thought he got hit in the balls too, don't lie.
And traps Vlad's sword closer to the floor, creating an opening. One which sends Vlad flying across the room and to the floor. I get that the silver weakens him, but to this degree, where he's blown back by a headbutt.
Well, it's a good thing a strong gust of wind doesn't fly by or anything.
Mehmed presses his advantage, which Vlad counters in a move that looks more like tapping props than the trajectory of an object being interrupted. Vlad blocks another attack by evenly distributing support on both sides.
That's good.
But by also turning his back to his opponent and removing eye contact.
That's bad.
And then Vlad escapes the guard,
That's good.
but leaves himself completely open to another attack.
That's bad.
But don't worry, Vlad retaliates with a cool line.
Can I go now?
Mehmed uses his sword to scatter a score of coins into the air, diffusing Vlad's line of sight.
Not that that's mattered so far.
We continue on with what could very well be some triangles as the swords clash, but then again, put screens in front of the camera, that works! A few close-ups later and Vlad does a little turn into another attack. I mean, do I need to give details? Line of sight? Either Vlad or Mehmed raise the blades up, which is nice. Would easily be able to lead into another trapping of a sword, maybe a disarm? No? Nothing? Okay.
Alright, I'm more guessing that, seeing as how all this shaky cam kind of diffuses any actual work put into this scene. Over 4 months of work, and the cinematographer decides to pull a Snyder/Lucas on crack.
Then Mehmed uses coin attack. It's super effective. Mehmed, with Vlad Depeche at his feet, goes to grab a makeshift stake, but I guess he forgot he was fighting a vampire, as Vlad, after an all-important look to his son, turns into a cloud of bats to then stab Mehmed.
My name is Dracula, son of the devil.
This seems to strike me in the same way that the darkest hour of God of War 4 does.
In that we have Kratos reclaiming the Blades of Chaos, the symbols of his past sins, to be the monster needed to protect and save his son. Here we have Vlad reclaiming the armor that again is a symbol of past sins. But here, it's like if Kratos also became the official God of War again. Vlad completely gives way to the darkness, becoming a monster, a prince of darkness to save his son, but he's still not the Dracula. Not until his son is safe, which comes in the ending. The film ends with Dracula allowing his son to go to a safe place while he opens the clouds above, letting the sun in on his army of vampires and himself as a form of suicide. I see this as Dracula wanting to stop now that he's entirely giving himself to darkness. Now that he has practically nothing to live for, it's one last ditch attempt to stop himself, to die rather than live as a monster. But then of course that does not happen, and so it becomes a rebirth. Now that he is one with the dark, he's unshackled and can fully embrace the Dracula identity with no strings attached.
Let me go ahead and conspiracy theory now, as I propose that the sequel would probably have been the story of Dracula that we know from the books, just in modern day, with Caligula involved. Somehow. But then again, all of this got canned, so never mind!
We hope you've enjoyed No Moral Theater.
So with all of that being said, with this film plus the slate of other vampire material that we've looked at across this month, what are we left with?
In terms of this film, I mean, where do I start? If it's not the terrible camera work, the shoddy staging, the confused direction, or the messy progression, it does say something that this is what was supposed to spearhead the new wave of Universal Monsters franchise. An action thriller instead of a horror suspense.
Maybe it says something about the overall representation of vampires.
We've established that vampires evolved, from mindless proto-zombies to princes of darkness, to glorified body pillows that shit glitter.
Okay, that may have been a de-evolution, but point being...
The running theme throughout was the idea of infection, disease, plague.
And do you know of any recent plagues?
Maybe vampires will see a comeback, one which folds back in this idea of plague in a more overt way, because let's be honest,
Vampires just aren't scary anymore. Drive a stake through their heart, bit of garlic, holy water, done by dinner. Maybe this could change with more modern sources to draw from, because right now, it's yeah, they're just kind of disappointing. Thank you for watching this week's video. In the comments, let me know if you've seen Dracula Untold and what you thought of it. Did you find it more on the meh side? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What are your thoughts? Do you want Luke Evans to come back as Dracula in some other production? Thank you all for watching once again, everyone, and until next time, peace be with you.